It started subtly, like most things do. I didn't really notice it at first. I mean, how could I have been so blind? How could I not see what was happening right in front of my face? Looking back, there were signs, of course, little things that if I had paid attention, maybe I would have realized what was happening, what was coming. But I didn't. I couldn't. And so here we are. Now, I hope this is going to be enough for you to believe me, because what happened after that? Well, that's where it gets really bad. Where it all goes very wrong. I just want you to know the truth. That's all I have left. My name is Jessica. This is my story. It began one evening. I was sitting in the kitchen at our little breakfast table, sipping my tea, listening to John tell me about his day. We'd been married for 6 years. We were happy. Well, as happy as one can be, I suppose. We had our ups and downs like everyone else, of course. But John was my best friend. There wasn't anyone else in the world I'd rather be stuck with in an elevator, stuck in traffic, stuck on a deserted island. He was my person. We read each other's minds. Or at least I thought we did. So imagine my surprise when, as I sat there listening to him telling me about this new client of his, this new project he'd been working on, suddenly he stopped. He just stared ahead of him, eyes blank, his mouth slightly open. I, of course, asked him if everything was all right. And that was when the blankness in his eyes hit me. It wasn't there before. Not like that. It was there now, staring at me. But then just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. I chalked it up to stress, exhaustion, anything but what it actually was, because what would that make me? Crazy. I couldn't allow myself to think that, so I let it go. But the next time it happened, only a few days later, I couldn't ignore it. He was sitting on the couch watching TV, and I remember thinking how still he was. Usually when we watched TV together, he'd move around a lot. He'd laugh out loud. He'd make jokes. He'd comment on what was going on. But this time he was just still. His eyes were glued to the screen. His breathing was shallow. When the commercial break came, I turned to him and asked him, "Are you all right?" And that was when I saw it again, that blank look on his face. I reached out and touched him, and he flinched at my touch. "John," I said, my voice shaking. "What's wrong?" And finally, he blinked. He turned to me, and for a moment there, just a moment, I saw something else in his eyes. Something dark, something dangerous. And then it was gone. He must have seen the concern on my face because he reached out and took my hand. "Sorry," he said. "I'm fine. Just tired." And then he gave me a small smile. The one that crinkles his eyes at the corners. The one that makes me melt inside. And I believed him because, why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I believe him? The man who has been my rock for the last 6 years. The man who has never intentionally hurt me. The man who I love more than anything in this world. Of course, I believed him. But then the incidents kept happening. More and more frequently. I would hear him humming while he worked. And every time I walked past his office, I heard the same tune. It was always the same tune. And every time I stopped outside his door to listen, he was always off key. I don't know what it was about that song, but it made my skin crawl. I hated it. And then he started bringing that song into the bedroom. One night I woke up, and there he was, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at me with wide eyes. He was humming that same tune, but now it was louder. It was grating. It was insane. I reached out to him, but he flinched away from me. He backed away until he was almost at the foot of the bed. "John," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What are you doing?" And he just kept staring at me, his eyes wide, unblinking. Then he started to hum again, and then he stood up. Slowly he got off the bed and walked past me. As he walked away, I heard him mumbling under his breath. But it wasn't the first time I'd heard him mumbling. He'd started doing that, too. Every morning when he woke up, he'd get out of bed and start mumbling to himself. Sometimes he'd do it while he was getting dressed or eating breakfast. Sometimes he'd do it while he was driving. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could hear the venom in his voice. I could feel the hatred coming from him, directed at me. I would call his name. I would ask him what he was doing, what he was saying, but he would just ignore me. He would just keep mumbling. Then one night, I followed him. I followed him because I needed answers. I needed to know what was going on. And then I found him. I found him standing at the window, staring out at the moon. I stood behind him, watching him, waiting for him to turn around, waiting for him to answer my questions. But he never did turn around. Instead, he continued to stare out at the moon, his shoulders shaking. And that's when I noticed it. That's when I realized that he was crying. I don't want to be too dramatic, but I felt my heart break right then and there. All those months of worry, of fear, of sleepless nights, they came crashing down on me, and I wanted to reach out to him, but I couldn't. I just stood there, frozen, unable to move, unable to speak. He cried for a long time, and as the minutes ticked by, I slowly crept closer and closer to him. I wanted to comfort him, but he didn't want my comfort. He didn't want me near him. When he finally turned around, his eyes were red and swollen. He looked at me for a long moment without saying a word, and then he spoke. "Don't come any closer," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. It was like hearing the voice of a complete stranger. It was my husband's voice, but it wasn't. It was like an imitation. It was like he was reading my lines. "John," I whispered, my voice cracking. "What's wrong?" He shook his head and took a step back. "Stay away from me," he said, and I felt my blood run cold. I felt my entire body freeze. What had I done to deserve this? What had I done to deserve this? And then he did something that made my blood run completely cold. He smiled. He gave me a tight smile, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was a smile that said, "I don't know you. I never did know you. You are nothing to me." And in that moment, I knew that I had lost him. I knew that whatever had happened to John was permanent. And then he did the unthinkable. He picked up his phone and dialed 911. I don't know what he told them. I don't know why he called them. I don't know what he expected them to do. But I do know that when the police arrived, when the sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer and closer, he looked at me, really looked at me, and he smiled again. And then he said, "It's all right, John, I called the cops. They're here for you now." And then he turned away from me and faced the door, leaving me alone in the room with my thoughts. They took me away in the end. I never really knew what was wrong with him. I never really got an answer. I never really understood what was going on. All I know is that the man I loved, the man I married, the man I trusted, the man I slept next to every night, wasn't the man I thought he was. He wasn't the man I loved. He was something else, something terrifying, something that now shared my home and my life. That's all. I have left the memory of the man I once loved, the memory of the life we once shared, and the knowledge that the monster that now lives in my house isn't real, isn't human, isn't anything I can ever hope to understand. And that's the most terrifying thing of all.